Hi there, and welcome back to another installment of Virtual Visits with the President. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome our Director of Admissions, Kelly Moutsatson. Kelly, how are you and your team doing?
Greetings, President Schott, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. And on behalf of the Office of Admissions, we want to thank you for your words of encouragement, your guidance, and inspiration during these challenging times. And to answer your question, our team is doing well. And I'm so proud of each and every one of them. You know, not only am I proud of the team that we have in the Office of Admissions, but I'm incredibly grateful to all of our campus partners as we pull together to be innovative in our thinking and to find creative solutions to the many challenges we've all been presented. You know, and despite the fact we've all had to become experts at lightning speed in this virtual world and working remotely, you know, I don't think that we really let distance compromise good teamwork. And I'm really a firm believer in, you know, doing what we can versus focusing on what we can't do. And I remain optimistic, and I'm continue to work with this team in developing new tools, you know, and coming up with all kinds of possibilities through telecounseling and virtual visits. And we really come together as a team. So we found that this disruption has actually inspired innovations in recruitment and definitely have given us tools that we're going to be able to use, you know, well, long after this pandemic has passed.
Well, that's really great to hear, Kelly. I know it was a big transition. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're doing it? How are you conducting visits? How are you reaching out to families?
Well, you know, a lot changed, obviously. Some of the mainstays of college admissions really did change in that with the process as well. Things like high school visits and college fairs and the opportunity for students and families and guests to visit SOU on our beautiful campus and tour it, you know, it all came to an abrupt halt. So with that came some other setbacks. You know, students suddenly faced cancellation of standardized tests and you know, finishing their coursework and getting transcripts. So you know, it really sent not only our institution scrambling for how to stay ahead of the curve, you know, but students as well. So we know that students are facing a lot of challenges and will continue to do so. So we've asked ourselves, you know, how can we really help to mitigate some of that? How can we do the best possible job that we can to meet students where they are? And I think one of the greatest tools we've had in the past is to be able to get in front of students, parents, counselors with face-to-face interaction. But, you know, coronavirus changed all of that completely. So we've moved to virtual platforms, and we continue to share those experiences in a new way. One of the first things our team did was to build a web page with a depository of information so that students and guests could seek out the answers that they need. And the web page is really a great place to start. You know, there students can find a lot of information on how to sign up for virtual information sessions. They can still meet with admissions counselors through face-to-face video chats. We're still hosting virtual events like our Rater receptions, which was a great segue into Rater registration, and students can even still take a virtual tour. And we've done some pretty amazing things through social media as well, things like Ask Me Anything. And you know, before all of this went down, I have to confess I really didn't know what AMAs were all about, but Ask Me Anythings are quite popular with students and guests. These are hosted by admissions counselors, and we also have a student version where our Rater ambassadors, who are current students, you know, will also host these events. And then we've had a wonderful 360-degree virtual tour in place for quite some time, but that option has really become more valuable to us now more than ever. And students and guests can still explore campus in that way, but we also host live events every Friday where a Rater ambassador is on campus still doing the backwards walk, you know, and taking guests across the campus, and they're able to ask questions live and get responses right on the spot. So, you know, we're enjoying these unique experiences, and certainly are looking forward to exploring other ways to help get information out in front of students.
I think one of the things that is really encouraging to me is that you're probably enabling many more students to see the beautiful campus. Students in Hawaii, for example, or Alaska or American Samoa, who might not have been able to visit, can actually get a closer look at the campus.
That is absolutely true. And I think that's one of the things we really appreciate about that. The things I mentioned earlier about Rater receptions, for example, we were limited to certain dates on the calendar year where we would go to certain places. And if a student and their family might have been able to join us, that's great. But now students can really explore these events at their leisure from the comforts of their home, and allow us to have more meaningful conversation following those events.
So Kelly, I'm wondering about admissions requirements. Has anything changed in that area as a way of helping students? I know they're having problems with testing and finishing high school.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we've been and continue to ask, what can COVID-19 teach us about access to college? And the only way to really truly see that from the lens of a prospective student was to look at our admissions policies and practices and focus on what barriers and challenges, they might be facing. And you've talked about some of those, and I've mentioned it as well. One of the very first changes we did implement was to remove the test feature. So now we have a test optional admissions process for all new first year applications for fall 2020. And while the idea of becoming test optional, that's been in development for some time, and it's the best fit for our holistic review approach, we opted to make this change now specifically in response to the recent ACT and College Board test cancellations. And then also knowing that it was a challenge for students, or would be a challenge for them to obtain transcripts, or even that their AP tests would be a challenge to take even at home. We moved to making an admission decision based on self-reported GPA until the official transcript would become available. And then while May 1st has come and gone, that's long been recognized as a national priority decision or deposit deadline. COVID-19 saw a lot of universities, moving or delaying that deadline to later in the summer, but at SOU, we actually decided just to eliminate that pressure of a firm date. And our reason and hope and desire for doing that was to provide families with the patience and understanding and time that they need, and to be a better partner in making one of the greatest decisions that a student can possibly make. And we're committed to that. We want to make that journey together with the hopes that SOU still remains a strong possibility, and that we can greet them in the fall.
Well, speaking of the fall, students who may be thinking of the following year enrollment, will they be able to come and get like private tours, they and their families, for example?
As the situation evolves, we're certainly taking advice from public health experts, and we're working proactively with local and state health agencies to protect the health and well-being of all students and employees. So naturally, we hope to resume our campus tours soon and well into the fall. And more updates and resources may be found at sou.edu/campus. Meanwhile, I would encourage families to take advantage of the virtual options through sou.edu/virtual connections. And they can also still take a virtual tour through sou.edu/virtual tour. But yes, we definitely are anxious to get back to providing tours face to face. Due to campus changes in response to COVID-19 concerns, and as we manage this time of social distancing, an online program has been created that encompasses the values SOU holds of building relationships with our students and connecting them to faculty, staff, and each other as they register for classes and make the successful transition into the SOU community. So the model and schedule for first year and transfer rate registration events that were formerly on campus, as well as events that we used to travel for, like Hawaii and American Samoa, will now be a hybrid of live virtual meetings and presentations coupled with online modules and chats. And all newly admitted students are expected to complete radar registration. And so through this virtual experience, students are going to actually have an opportunity to meet with folks across campus, schedule classes, and then finalize next steps to enrollment. Invitations have gone out to students and will continue to go out. And another barrier that we have removed is to defer the enrollment deposit. So we just need confirmation that a student intends to enroll, and we will get them rolling through this process and signing up for radar registration. The events do fill up quickly, so students are actually encouraged to sign up as soon as possible once they get that email verification. And then if they are unsure of a choice of dates, or if something doesn't work out, with any of the dates that are listed there, then we encourage them to contact us so we can work through that process with them. So again, look for your email. I would check the SOU email account that was issued to each and every admitted student, but they can also keep an eye on their recruitment email as well. And the first event's actually full already, so for June 26th.
So Kelly, I've been asked by families if new students should really think about taking a gap year instead of beginning college during the pandemic and with the level of uncertainty that we have. What would be your answer to those families?
I know there are a lot of narratives that students are starting to hear now, actually proposing that the class of 2020 might want to consider a gap year, but I'd caution students on that. Naturally we want to support a student and their families in the decision-making process, but I do think it's worth noting that, what students might be looking for in a COVID gap might be a little bit different than what students have been looking for in the past. Typically gap years are planned out and they usually include a mix of service projects. Sometimes if a student isn't sure what they want to study, usually some international travel to help students in those areas. But I think that, we're really unsure of what the future holds, right? And I think I would just caution making that decision too quickly without considering what that gap year might actually gain. With less travel now, with fewer job options and the possibility of staying at home, you might want to ask, what else would you be doing if not going to school? So our advice would be, continue preparing for the fall. If for some reason the situation starts to go in a different direction and SOU needs to pivot again to be remote or deliver online, we'll certainly help to make that decision. And if they need to defer at that time to winter or spring or even next fall, we can work together with a family to do that.
So Kelly, one of the most challenging aspects of the pandemic have been the economic impacts on families. So I have kind of a two-part question. The first one is, if students and their families have experienced financial hardship, can they have their financial aid awards revisited?
Yeah, we've actually been fielding quite a few questions from admitted students who have been experiencing some financial difficulties as a result of this pandemic. So I would say that if students and their families have any concerns about this, they should refer to the CARES Act section of the Rader Student Services webpage. There's a whole section there for newly admitted undergraduates and graduates, and recommends that if they are facing a change in income that might affect their expected family contribution, there's a special form there. They can actually upload it. It's called Special Considerations Appeal. And they can do that through sou.verifymyfafsa.com, and that could potentially result in some additional financial aid. So yes, that's definitely something that we're willing to assist families with.
I'm sure that will be welcome news to some families. And we've been talking about students as if they're all 18 years old, but in fact, some of the families themselves may be interested in coming back to school if they've lost a job, or they feel like they want to retrain to be more competitive in a changed economy. What can you say to the potential adult learners who might want to come to SOU?
Why not? We actually have had quite a few conversations with individuals looking to do just that, and I would encourage that. It's a great time to further education, look for new opportunities. I know I've got a can-do attitude, but this is the great time to continue education and explore different options. It's been an interesting world, and I think that you've stated it so many times, one that's not the precedents, and in unprecedented times, I think we default to what we know best, and that's educating ourselves and seeking better opportunities down the road. So we're here to help partner with that, and I encourage it.
Well, one of the things I've noticed is that folks with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees have not been quite as hard hit by unemployment. So there are lots of reasons to think that that's a good investment, and we have resources to help people make that decision if that's what they want to explore.
Indeed, absolutely.
Well, Kelly, it's been delightful talking with you. You provided so much great information. Thank you for taking the time to be with me. And for anybody watching, we hope you're enjoying them. And if there's anybody in particular you'd like for me to speak with, please send an email to presidentsoffice@sou.edu with that suggestion. All right, thanks, Kelly. Tell your team we appreciate all they're doing. And get out there and enjoy this beautiful weather we're having here in Southern Oregon.
Thank you, President Schott. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.